For those of you on my side that don't know, we just had a full hour over on Jacob's podcast, so we're fully tuned up and ready to go. We'll just continue on the conversation, although I'll probably take it a little bit different direction. I think we were talking about the foibles around supporting Trump and what's happening now, and I kind of want to jump into the war aspect of that. Man, it's like what's your take on this, man? We've gone from no new wars to we've bombed the most countries in a single year in U.S. history. What gives?
I guess there was like a hidden exclamation point in the no new wars. Like, no,
It was a
new
comma.
wars, right? So other than that glib comment, man, I have just so disappointed, as I kind of was saying earlier when we were on my show. I thought that way more on the MAGA side were serious, both on the base, like the voters, and the people that were in the administration, right? Like, I kind of expected we were not going to get great results with just the Israel Gaza stuff, but I kind of was like, that's a quagmire, and it's kind of hard to expect too much there. But I thought we'd get more from Russia and Ukraine. I wasn't expecting, regime change in Venezuela. Wasn't even on my radar. And then I at least thought that like Trump would throw Israel with a bone with Gaza, but then try to like maintain no more interventions in the Middle East and like rolling back our involvement there. And no, he's basically, I mean, I don't know, man. It's like, it's kind of hard. So let me make a comparison here. When people get mad when I call Israel an apartheid state, I go, okay, well, let me describe the situation with the Palestinians. And then you come up with a term politically, legally, in international politics that describes that situation that's not apartheid. And it's generally kind of hard for them. It's like, okay, now I'm not saying that Trump is Netanyahu's bitch. Sorry, I'm cursed the third time tonight. But again, give me an explanation here that fits the facts on the ground that, explains them other than that explanation. And I will gladly entertain it. But
I'm told that's a conspiracy theory, Jacob. Like
Trump
we're just
literally to like a whole Republican crowd was like, hey man, there's the Adelsons. They gave me tons of money to support Israel, man. They love Israel more than America. That's not conspiracy theory anymore. That's just literally like if the only positive spin here, Brent, is that Trump is playing literally 90D underwater multi-dimensional space chess, and he's literally like on a mission to expose the Zionist Israel lobby in the world by just like making it super obvious. Like that is the only positive spin that I can provide to you on what's going on.
It has to be it because I'm told and I've seen a video of this from this week that he's a prayerful man. I saw an entire cadre of like 47 people surrounding him and praying him. He was very very pensive and just thinking about obviously very Christian things while they're praying over him.
When Saul was hunting David, he was he was disobeying God. And he knew God had kind of condemned his rule and was going to replace him with David. Saul was doing a lot of praying too. You know what I mean? Sometimes when you're doing a lot of evil crap, yeah, you might be a little bit fearful and prayerful and be like, okay, please don't smite me.
Yeah, but he wasn't praying there. Like, you don't believe that, right? Like he was probably sitting. Yeah, he was probably sitting over there reviewing his greatest hits from the Epstein material. Like he wasn't praying. Like the fact that they're even doing the show is just offensive to me.
He either wasn't praying, or if he was praying, it probably wasn't to God. So,
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
especially depending on how inculcated he is in the Epstein stuff. But I mean, that's a whole different conspiracy theory rabbit hole than we probably have planned for tonight.
Is
But
that a conspiracy theory at this point? Like, this is one of the things where I'm looking at this. Like, I know I've got superior pattern recognition skills, but to be a normie, don't you just know what's going on? Like, isn't this obvious what's happening here?
I don't know, man. I mean, don't you just believe that all the wealthy elites gather together to eat pizza and grape soda? Don't
Yeah,
it just seems
and nothing
completely
weird about
normal to
that.
me. Nothing weird about that, you know, and nothing weird about all the other weird stuff in there about, like, satanic rituals and sacrifices and yeah, like, that's all just cuckoo stuff. Like, I mean, obviously, it's all kosher. Hillary Clinton's a great person. That
Oh
you know
boy,
you know, that's gotta be, like, the weird like, at some point, it's like, to defend Trump, you need to be defending Bill and Hillary Clinton, and I just wanna know at what point MAGA realizes just how much they've sold their soul to the devil to be playing this game. I mean, it's quite despicable.
no, it definitely is, and I'm starting to wonder a little bit. You know, like I'm a rational guy. You know that I'm an atheist, and I'm, kind of, questioning stuff, and I want to know what's going on. But like the stuff that I've dismissed, I'm like, is there something to this? Is this really like a cabal of like child sacrificing satanic PDFs out there? Is that really what's happening in the world? Is that how they maintain power? I don't know. It's starting to sound a little bit more plausible.
Um, yeah, I mean, the only hesitation I have to really endorse that is that it would force me to slightly change my theology of the supernatural, because although I believe in the supernatural as a Christian, but I generally think that the demonic realm doesn't really have any real power. And I guess I would just have to start realizing, oh, they do have some real power, I guess, to like keep which I guess, there is something, the Bible says that Satan is the ruler of this world. So I mean, now the Christian, I guess, like, you don't have to get too meta here, but like, you believe that God allows certain evils to happen providentially because he's going to ultimately undo them, and kind of like the model of he used Joseph's brothers selling him into slavery to eventually accomplish the ultimate good of saving Joseph's family and all of Egypt and all of the Jewish people. It's like, okay, so God allows evil temporarily. What man intends for evil, God uses for good. So, okay, God allows evil nations to reign for a time now and to do evil things. And if you drink, if you're like me and you have faith, you can have trust that good things are going to happen there. Uh, but doesn't change the fact that, at least as far as like direct influence. Yeah, I mean, the Bible is pretty clear that Satan's the ruler of this world. Psalms 2 talks about, the nations rage in vain, against the Lord and his anointed, and they conspire to kinda, like, break their bonds, and to just, uh, build wealth and power to try to I mean, it's the same thing as, like, even the Tower of Babel going back. Like, the Bible, even if you wanna read it just archetypically, and just as like a collection of human mythology that kind of tells us about like our development of our socioeconomic and psychological faculties as human beings. Like, there's something to that, right? That like the entire Christian corpus seems to be kind of aiming at that, like, to serve the good is to serve a kingdom that's not of this world, and to serve evil, well, evil is associated with all of the kingdoms of this world. So, that I think that's some really easy pattern recognition in my opinion.
Interesting. So I want to ask you this, since you're somebody who's way more versed in the religious stuff than I am. What's up with Iran burning that Baal, statue like twice now, and why is that anti-Semitic?
Um, I might not have seen this. They burned what statue now?
Baal. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
Oh,
Baal.
Baal. They burned a
Baal.
Baal. So who
Yeah.
burned a Baal statue?
Iran twice. Right? So this happened before the war. Then they did it again after they started getting attacked. And there was a bunch of people saying this is anti-Semitic, and it was like egging on Israel. I'm like, somebody needs to fill me in here because I don't understand what was going on. I thought this God was had to do with something about child sacrifice and a bunch of other crazy stuff. Fill me in, man? I don't understand this.
I mean, listen, man, all I'm going to say is that it wouldn't be the first time in history that a nation called Israel forsook God to serve a god called Baal and engaged in child sacrifice. So, they literally did that in the Bible. They stopped worshiping God and they served Baal. That's what, like, if you know the story of Elijah and like the fire coming down and burning the sacrifices, that the king of Israel at the time, Ahab, had led the nation away from worshiping God and had decided to worship the gods of the neighboring Canaanite countries and whatnot, which was Baal. So it's, I guess, history repeats itself after all.
I guess so. It was a weird thing to see, and being not sort of tied into that world too tightly, I was kind of like, what's going on here? What are they doing? It's like they seem to be trolling Israel somehow through this. So whatever, man. I do want to talk about the war, though. That's probably the primary reason I want to talk to you today, because I think everyone who is in the liberty movement, for the most part, is pretty anti-war. That's kind of like a standard, take if you're going to, be a core libertarian. Like it's good to be non-interventionist, and it's probably good to not, have this adventurism across the world and blowing up all these other people and having blowback and creating generational enemies. Like that's probably a good thing. I'm starting to think that the libertarians today are not anti-war enough. I
Hmm.
really am, and I know that you've called me out for going maybe a little bit too far with this, and I don't know if I'm too far or if everyone else isn't far enough. I want to sort of probe at
Okay.
that
Yeah.
tonight. And I think my claim was like, I think it would be a good thing if we socially ostracize the troops instead of saying thank you for your service, right? Because when you get down to brass tacks, it's like we like to couch this language like Donald Trump blew up this school with 175 little girls in Tehran. It's like, no, he didn't. The soldiers did that, and everybody who deployed on this, this war knew that this was just a proxy war for Israel, and this was going to be a cover up for the Epstein files. Like everybody knew, it was talked about. Matter of fact, there was memes months in advance this is going to happen, that Donald Trump's going to attack Iran to distract from the Epstein files. Like we knew what was going to be, and this war that's being, all the evil actions that are taking place are being done by real people. These are American troops and Israeli troops in uniform, that they are pushing the buttons, they're pulling the triggers, they're blowing all these people to smithereens, they're destroying oil infrastructure and freshwater desalination plants and all these things. See, that they're the
Oh yeah,
ones that are
Iran's on
doing this.
Iran's on like fire right now in a lot of places. It's brutal, like the burning of their oil facilities and stuff.
Yeah, and so my thought is like, why do we say thank you for your service? Why do we not? Why is it not? And here's an analogy I've thought about since we've had that back and forth. Is like we all look at ICE and say like, this is terrible. Like what these people, this is not an honorable profession. And when people refuse to give ICE service in restaurants and stuff, like most people cheer, like, yeah, like go to hell. Like they should not feel welcome anywhere they go. Yet for some reason, there's this metamorphosis that happens with troops to where people just like, well, and they treat them like automatons, which is what's offensive to me. Being a veteran, like I know what it's like to sign up and be like, to go through the calculations. I might have to go do this. I might have to kill. I might end up dying over this. I might end up maimed. Like you have to go through this process, this mental process when you sign up. And I get the fact that people are suckered into it. The recruiters lie. The people are propagandized into this from a young age. I know all the things, but at the end of the day, it's like we don't accept that excuse if anybody, like for example, I like to flip it around. Like what about a jihadi that grew up their entire life hearing that it was a virtuous and just thing to blow up the infidels? If they blow up a school, do we just say, oh, he's just misguided, or do we say like, no, this is evil. This is evil, and we shouldn't say thank you for your service in any regard. I feel like we've lost moral clarity, and it's upsetting to me, like especially being a veteran and knowing a lot of this sort of anger comes from the fact that I was sucked into that. And I know a lot of people that were sucked in that same type of thing. And I feel like society is culpable at that point. Like we have some moral culpability if we do not take a stand and say, no, this is not okay. So, what are your thoughts? What am I getting wrong?
So I want to make a distinction from the get go here, which is that what I'm not saying is that we should abandon the condemnation of the actions of all involved, including those at the top of the command who are issuing the commands to go and attack innocent people and destroy infrastructure and destroy entire neighborhoods and cities and things like that, hospitals, schools. That should be absolutely condemned from the people at the top of the chain of the command, and the individuals carrying out those actions. I'm not saying that we should sort of like recast those actions in any light based on what I'm going to say after this, to say the action is now suddenly not evil and not something to be condemned. I guess I just want to take a step back to sort of unpack the blowback argument a little bit more and add not just a political sort of uh, analysis to it, but a psychological one too, which is that because you compared this to like like your average, not average, I guess, but like of those who are engaged in acts of terrorism, who are part of Islamic fundamentalist groups in the Middle East. Uh, yeah, we wouldn't condone them doing like a suicide bombing of a hospital or school or a bus full of people. We would say that's evil. We would also, I think, if we were like judging that person, I think that we would want to be careful to not sort of like buy into a caricaturization of that person that would sort of say that like, well, this person wanted to go and kill people because they are just evil and that they just had this like fully rationed well, I mean, it's anti-rational, but you know what I mean. Like they fully thought out, fully autonomous sort of like uh series of decisions in their life where like they just were like, I hate everything that's good and I just want to kill innocent people because I'm just like pure evil. Right? That's not how these people are operating, despite the fact that the Ben Shapiro's of the world and the Mark Levins of the world will try to tell you that essentially that like most if not all the Muslims born in the Middle East or in the world are essentially part of this like death cult where they just like that literally is it, like they're just like we want to kill everyone who's not us, like convert or die. um I think that the blowback thing is not just saying that when you go there and you occupy someone or you intervene that there'll be this sort of like resistance that pushes back. It means that there's people reach breaking points, right? It doesn't matter how principled you are. It doesn't matter like what a good person you are. Everyone's going to have a breaking point where they say this evil. Not everyone, I guess, but a lot of people. I think, unfortunately,
I
the
think you're more
vast
optimistic
majority
than
of
me, brother.
people. What
I think you're more optimistic than me.
Well, let me finish. I think the vast majority of people are going to have a breaking point where when evil has touched them to such a point that they are going to sort of then meet that evil on the same terms of like the evil they're being dealt. Sort of like, well, they have come and killed my family. They've killed my children or my parents or my cousins or my neighbors, and so I'm going to do whatever it takes to fight this evil tooth and nail. And that means that, like, I'm also going to engage in those things because they've been brought up in a world where that's all they know. All they know is that war is engaged with by acts of terrorism. And so, in a way, and Dave Smith caught a lot of flack for saying this the other day on the Piers Morgan show, but he was 100% correct when he called out the IDF as the greatest purveyor of terrorism in the region and the American government as the greatest purveyor of terrorism in the world. And so we're teaching the Muslim terrorists in the Middle East how to be terrorists because that's what we do. And so they're responding like with like because they you know they're not raised to believe in the non-aggression principle. They're not, even if you went and tried to explain that to them, it's just like, that kind of like has a little hierarchy of needs. At some point,
Hmm.
I don't want to be misunderstood here. I think religion and philosophy and rationality are like the foundations of civilization, and we should be pushing and arguing for those at all times. But man, beyond just like food and shelter, when you strike at the core of people's like identities, like their homes, their families, then philosophy and rationality are going to go the way are going to go away, and they're going to resort to those kind of like primal fight or flight instincts, and just like I'm at war and I'm going to do what I have to resist and fight this enemy. Now, that's for that one side, and just to the military side, I think that we have a more sophisticated game here in America on all of us, not just those serving in the military. I think we're all uh, born into the system through public schooling, through national anthems playing, through our media, through entertainment that just indoctrinates us in all of this sort of like accepting that we're a moral nation and that our military is a moral military and everything we do is good and it fights for freedom for us and across the world. And then you go into the military and like I'm sure you can speak to this, and I have friends in the military who've spoken to this. I mean, you're basically conditioned to sort of lose your own inhibitions to make moral decisions, and you're instead conditioned to just kill on command and accept the directives of your commanding officers. So I would like to, as an endpoint, kind of make serving in the military and serving in the police force and serving ICE a kind of stigma. But I don't think we do that by demonizing the people. I think we do it by demonizing the position and through education and fighting propaganda and culture. And like what I think libertarians and anarchists inadvertently do, we're not dropping bombs on people here in America, right? But propaganda can play a similar effect in the psychology of people, where if you come at them and say you're a horrible person, you're evil because you serve in the military, they are now psychologically conditioned to not listen to anything you have to say. And I think that's the wrong approach. Because I also think it's wrong. I don't think that they're evil. I don't think that the majority of the people serving the military, even the ones carrying these acts out, I think a lot of them have really just been radically propagandized to think that they are fighting for the freedom of themselves and the Iranian people or the Israeli people, and that, or at least the people that they're killing, that they're really the bad guys, right? And that there's no other way to do, or and that's if they're even thinking about it. A lot of them are just following orders. Now, we should not like excuse it and be like, we don't want a society of people who just follow orders, right? But like the the way to fix that is sort of like several chains up, like preventing them from being in that position in the first place. And once they're there, to deprogram them, it takes something more sophisticated than just moral condemnation. And also the American public, who's been conditioned to respect the troops. It's the same thing with the police, right? Like I've seen diminishing returns on the sort of approach of like I get it, like the whole there's no such thing as a good cop. All cops are bastards. Just man, I get it on a philosophical level, just pure principle, I get it, and I pretty much agree. But if we're in the business of trying to change hearts and minds, then we have to understand that we have to kind of tackle these things a little bit differently, and also kind of like sympathize with the fact that like I get what you're saying, like these people kind of still do have agency. I don't know. I think maybe you're overselling the degree to which a lot of people have agency, especially as like agency is not something everyone's equally gifted in, just like intelligence is not something that everyone's equally gifted in. So I threw a lot out there, but it's a very complicated subject.
No, it definitely is, and thank you for giving such a detailed answer. And I am considering all of that stuff. But here's where I'm coming from. There's a couple of things you raised. I think the changing hearts and minds and stuff that gets brought up a lot. And I think one of those, I kind of think some of it's a cop out, not with you necessarily, but with some people, I think it's like the third rail. You can't ever say anything about the military because people are worried. They're less worried about speaking the truth, saying what they think, than they are with some agenda. You know, I'm in a movement and I've got to convince people. I got to change somebody's mind on this issue. And I guess I don't approach it that way. You know, like as you know, I'm not political. I'm not into any parties. I don't vote. I'm here to talk about what's true and what's good in the world. And I want to say what I think. That's the other component too. Uh, Unfiltered as directly as I possibly can, with love and respect as much as possible. Right. So that's like my grounding. And I don't feel like a lot of people are engaging that same way. I think people are scared. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want, and I don't think that honestly, for most people, I don't think there's any atrocity the U.S. military could commit to where they would be like, no, we're off the train now. Like we're we're not riding with the troops anymore. And so that bothers me a little bit. Um, and to just push back a little bit, I also study psychology quite deeply. One of the things that's important to know is that they've done studies on social ostracism. This is one of the reasons I brought this up as a tactic, is because when human beings are ostracized by their tribe, the same part of their brain lights up in an fMRI as if they're being physically tortured. So being rejected from the group actually does have some sort of value, and it's one of those things where it's like I'm you know, I'm not a nonviolent person, and just doing that is a simple action that's peaceful that could potentially move the needle. And I think that the more society rejects this as an honorable profession, the less war you're going to see, the less kids getting suckered in by the propaganda. We have to have some buttressing against that propaganda. We have to have some counter measures to that propaganda. And in my view, like I got moral clarity around this subject. I'm looking at this. I'm like, this is not good, guys. The last quarter century has been nothing but wars of aggression. There's been no defense of the homeland. This has been a million dead Iraqis plus 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 all the way down the line. Like you can't say, if you're in the military right now, you can't say you didn't know. Like everybody knows what the deal is, and everybody who signs up, I promise you, Jacob, I went through this when I signed up. Like you have to do that calculus. Like, well, if I go in, here's the likelihood of me getting shipped off to go do some horrible thing halfway across the world. Like there's nobody in the last, I mean, being charitable, the last 10 years that could join the military or reenlist and say, I had no idea that I was going to be, told to do some horrible things in the Middle East. Like we knew, what the deal is. Like
But
it's
I don't know,
everybody knows.
but I don't know how true that is, because I could have said the same about people in Afghanistan and Iraq. It was like, well, if you would have studied the history of the 20 years previous, you would have known what you were getting into. The people who got in for the 80s, like with Desert Storm and then the blockade of Iraq back then, should have known from what happened in Vietnam. So I'm like, I feel like to some extent, there's always a group of people who are kind of ignorant to like it. Like for people who are paying a lot of attention, like us, we think it's really obvious, but like there's a lot of people, especially young people, like I didn't think about it, man. It's crazy to think there's people who were born after 9/11 who like for us, 9/11 is like, so I was like I know you're older than me, so I don't know how old you were. I was like in third
I'm
grade. I
50.
was, so, you were probably a young adult when 9/11 happened. I was a third grader when 9/11 happened. So like, but there's people who are born that are just like 9/11 is just like a weird thing in their history books, right? And they might not know like anything really about it other than just kind of like the nominal, like, oh, planes crashed into a tower, and that's kind of why we went to war. But they don't know any of the surrounding uh historical context or pretenses or consequences or what happened in Afghanistan, right? There's so many people who are still surprised today when I tell them about the cost of war, just the cost of the war on terror. They go to the costofwarproject.com and they just do just the terror wars, and they kind of undercount because they don't include all the countries they should. But we're talking about nearly 1 million deaths just in direct casualties and close to 4 million deaths in indirect casualties. People are just completely oblivious to this, Brent. I mean, I think there's more people are probably aware than they used to be, but it's still just a vast majority who are just like dumbstruck when I present these numbers and these facts to them. The other thing here, though, I think is sort of like the social ostracism point you bring up is I get it, but I kind of feel like it's not that simple, because again, it might cause pain, but pain doesn't always lead to change. I mean, how effective has social ostracism and shaming been for the left and for the woke minded in trying to make America less racist? If anything, it's kind of had the opposite effect, and people have I'm just going to become racist now, right?
Boy, they got
Um,
compliance for a while though, didn't they?
yeah, but if it's not long lasting, I don't know how important, how useful that is. I also don't think we're anywhere close to being in a position to actually effectively employ social ostracism because we're such a small movement. Even if beyond just anarchists to libertarians, the principled anti-war people in America, even if they all banded together, I don't think it'd be enough social ostracism just with all of us combined to. I think it would actually have the inverse effect, and it would just push people away from hearing us more rather than really punishing those people to the point where they really thought about, man, I don't want to. I mean, there already is a social stigma to joining ICE and whatnot, and I mean, people are still doing it. It hasn't really stopped. And the other thing it does is I feel like that gets weaponized by the duopoly, by the two party system, to then like, oh, ICE agents are getting attacked and it's being stigmatized. And so, oh, that's all these lefties, and they'll include me and you as lefties there, who are just pro the browning of America and pro the destruction of America. And hey, so right, they weaponize all of this stuff. So like even if I kind of get where you're coming from, I just feel like it's going to fall short, and it's going to actually, I think in most cases, create counterproductive results. Now, the last thing I'll say is that again, I don't want you to stop being radically committed to just saying what is true. I think we need to be saying what is true about these acts of aggression that the government is taking, that the wars are unjust, that they're unjustified even from like the you know the the propaganda and demystifying that and showing how it's sold on a bunch of lies and how it's being funded through taxation and through money printing and through uh, extortion, and that it's really for empire building and for resources and for Israel and all this stuff. And we need to point to it, right? And we should even point to the moral realities of like drop, being in command of a drone that drops bombs on a building full of men, women, and children. But then I think the question you need to ask yourself, Brent, is like, what puts it's kind of both ways. I always ask myself, what puts your average Palestinian or Afghani or uh, you know, uh, Jordanian in the position of strapping bombs to their chest to go blow up a bunch of people? And what puts an American, boy, probably who signed up, was groomed by a oh, what are they called? What's the term? The
The
recruiters.
recruiters.
Yeah, groomed by a recruiter most likely. What leads to a 17-year-old eventually being in the position to sit there and be like, "Yep, I'm dropping a bomb on a hospital and this is fine." Like I just don't. And listen, you're talking to a Christian who believes that we're all born inherently sinful, and I'm very aware of the existence of human evil, but I don't think that the norm of human evil is that people are just sort of like, if we don't socially ostracize them, then they're just sort of like automatically in the position of like, yeah, I'll just callously drop a bomb on innocent people. No, it's like they're heavily indoctrinated and conditioned and propagandized. And I don't think the ostracism is an effective tool against all of that.
It may not be, but at the end of the day, like I said, I'm committed to truth and I'm committed to saying what I think. And I think more people should do that. Uh, Here's a question for you. Is there any line for you to where you would change your mind and you would adopt my position?
Um, I think it's sort of like, I will say that there are cases where I think individuals should be ostracized or shamed, right? I don't think that everyone is,
Let me
innocent's the
give you a
wrong
thought
word.
experiment. The reason I'm asking this is like, because everybody always asks the question, how did World War II era Germany become this thing? How did the Nazis rise to power? How did the SS what was society doing? What was what was happening in the average German's brain to allow this type of evil to happen? So that's my sort of ground floor for asking this question. Like, is there anything American troops could do to where you'd be like, look, I'm off. I'm treating them in that same vein as like a Nazi soldier.
I think I treat the institution as being at least on the path to that, right? So I don't shy away from calling out the American apparatus, the government, the militaries, the commanding officers. Um, but I think I can kind of I think you can do that without to put it this way. I don't think that at any point I'm not saying you're saying this to, like, slight me or attack me, but I guess I'm just curious, like, you say you don't wanna compromise on the truth, and I feel like if you go and you look at any of my posts attacking the war in Iran or in Venezuela or in the past, I don't think at any point I'm compromising on the truth. I think the truth incorporates both the fact that these people are committing great evils and the facts of the indoctrination and the conditioning and all that. Like these are all true facts. And then we have to kind of figure out like how do we then there's what's true and then there's how we respond to what's true, which is based that's less of a that's kind of like you could say it has more of a Misesian element to it where we're kind of like evaluating the facts and I think it's not just strategy. It's like, well, we see a bunch of people committing a great evil and we want to oppose that evil. Now, how do we act in a way that corresponds with getting closer to our end of stopping the evil? Um, and I don't think that it's compromising on the truth to do that. I think it's kind of like you do, like, I would confront people, and I have confronted people even in my own church who have, like, their kids are in the military. And I go, like, listen, man, I know that you probably think that, like, you know, this is good for your son for, like, his future. He's gonna get all these educational opportunities, career, and, like, you probably thought, "Well, isn't it cool that my son is really brave and selfless and wants to, like, sacrifice for others, that he wants to go and fight for justice and for freedom, and he's willing to lay his life down for that." And that is, to be fair and to be completely honest, another true fact that needs brought into this equation is that that's the motivation of a lot of people who get themselves into this mess. And it's a little bit of that child naivety, and there's a grooming aspect to this for sure. Like you go to a young boy who's like doesn't know what his future is, and you're like, you can kind of like stoke up those feelings in them. But there's also something a little bit like I think where some people are naturally more like born to like an acclivity to to want to do those things. And I think it's like, hey, if your goal is to fight for liberty and for truth and for peace, and you're a Christian too, then like I think you need to consider that the American military doesn't serve any of those, and you start to just unpack the actual truth of all these interventions on them, and then you confront the people who are actively in the military, not with ostracism when like saying like you're a horrible person, but just with the truth. And like I've seen that work. Like one of my closest friends in this space is Jose Galison. He's a hardcore agorist, and he was in the military. Now he wasn't on the front lines, so it's not a perfect it was in combat, but he was someone who like while he was in the military was introduced to these ideas, introduced to libertarianism, and introduced to non-interventionism, and shown the truth about the propaganda, and that changed his mind, right? That brought him to actually changing it, and then working on leaving the military. And I've seen that work way more than just like you know, calling them, calling cops pigs or calling the people in the American military, just like monsters or murderers or whatever. Now, listen, I'll grant you this. I understand the annoyance, right? I also get really annoyed and aggravated when like there's all this sort of like just melodramatics about like the troops, right? About just like we have to thank them for their service and we have to stand for them and we have to like um I can't go to like I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but like I don't go to Mission Barbecue because I can't stand that like every day at every Mission Barbecue, at least in where I've seen, they make everyone at 12 o'clock stand up and do the national anthem. It's just
Jeez.
such a dumb I'm just like, "Nah, man." Like, I can't do that. I don't like participating in any of that. I think I'm not saying you should participate in any of that. I think you should call it out, but you can do that in a way that's less based about, like, I need to socially ostracize these people. I think what we need to do is just be beacons of light and truth and just, like, we're gonna stand apart. Right? Like, I know you're not a Christian, but, like, in those moments when you do those kind of things, you're kinda doing what the Bible does instruct us as Christians to do, which is to be counterculture, to be ambassadors for a different kingdom. You're being, like, an ambassador for a different way of living. You're like, "I don't serve America and its mythology and its civic religions and its dogmas," right? Um, but people are gonna be way more interested, way more curious to hear you talk about that stuff if you're, like, meeting them where they're at, than if, like, you're not participating in the Pledge of Allegiance, not participating in the national anthem, and calling out the American government, and then also you're like, "And, if you're in the military, you're scum. If you have children in the military, they're scum," right? Like, they're evil. I just don't see how that again, I don't think that's helpful, but I also think it's just kind of like it's making you're almost like collapsing what's true into just one dimension of the equation, rather than understanding the complexity of like we're we're complex creatures, as you know. We can have insane cognitive dissonance. We can genuinely think like people can literally be quagmired through conditioning and propaganda and trauma and all sorts of stuff to think that doing a bunch of evil, barbaric stuff is actually for the greater good, and they don't know any better. And it's our jobs to try to wake them up.
Thank you for that. I'm sort of processing as you're saying all that, and it sounds good. Like I get like the points you're trying to make and everything, but then I think about something as you and I have talked about this on the show before. What I consider inconsequential, meaning at we're talking about numbers here, like the trans thing, transing the kids, right? Like that's the big thing. People don't have problem with moral clarity around that, right? Like people will say this is evil. They will stand up and say this is a horrible evil, and it's about something that is far less consequential, right? Like we're talking about just 0.000, like it's just this tiny fraction of society, and everyone has got no problem being incredibly morally clear about this as a great evil. And even though the same sort of like propagandization happens, right? There's that cult of the gender cult, that weird, blue haired cult that people get brought into that. And it's the same type of indoctrination. It's a much smaller scale, right? Like there are these little pockets of where that's like really cool and edgy to do. But I don't see the same hesitance. I don't see the same waffling and the same kind of like, well, you got to think about this and don't want to offend anybody. And this is not the good strategy. It's like, no, people just say it. People are just like, no, your boy is not a girl, and no matter how many times you try to whatever you want to do for interventions, it's not going to change that fact, and the truth is good, and we're going to condemn
Well, I
you in public. Like the people don't have a problem with that. In that, at least I'm not viewing it as
so
people
I,
having a
I
problem
hear
with
what you,
that.
I hear what you're saying, but that did we're not debating, but right, but that argument doesn't work on me because that's not how I approach that subject, and I actually call the conservatives and Christians out who go after the trans issue like that, or even gay, just LGBT in general. When they go after that issue in that way, I call them out for that because I don't think that's the right way to approach that either. Because I tell them, listen, I'm with you, right? I basically have the same conversation with them about those issues as I have with you about war. I'll also make your point that like, this stuff is sinful, but also like you're way more outraged about this than other things that are probably more deserving of your attention. But beyond that, I'll have the same thing and be like, listen, uh, there's people that have real mental illnesses, and there's people who have been indoctrinated. There's people who've been groomed. And like, we should call out the ideology is wrong and we should oppose it. But man, we should have compassion for the people. Maybe not like the butchers who are actually like, in that case, I get you're saying it's small, but I would agree. Like, there's people out there, activists, surgeons, doctors, and whatnot who are like actually like abusing children. And like, those people, I'm like, yeah, I don't have much sympathy for them. Just like I don't have much sympathy for like the people in charge in like the American government. Like I'm not sitting here going poor Donald Trump or poor Dick Cheney or poor George Bush, right? Or anything like that. The people in power, the people who are like controlling and pushing the agenda, I have very little sympathy for them. I tend to hold back very little on them. You know, I was actually one of the few who, like, when LPNH did that Megan McCain meme,
Hmm.
I was sorry. Like to that day, I go like, I just have a hard time condemning that because it just brings this kind of hypocrisy up of like, how dare you, you know, make fun of someone for crying over their dead parent. It's just like, I don't know, the dead parent in this case, someone who helped create a whole bunch of children crying over their dead parents. So, like, if you're going to go that route, then you know you're pulling the rug out from under you. But anyway, I tangented there. But my point just being that, yeah, I tell them too, like, you know, your average person who went through this trans stuff, and even a lot of the people who are like maybe not at the top, but that are just like, um, just involved in this, even parents, like, imagine as a parent not being really studied on this, and then all of a sudden being like told by a bunch of teachers and doctors, like, you got to do this stuff or your kid's going to kill themselves, right? Like, excuse me. I still think that stuff's wrong. I'm going to call out what I think is true about those issues, but I'm not going to demonize those people. I don't think it's going to help for me to like say I'm going to ostracize every, gay and trans person or anyone who thinks differently on these issues. Like, no, I think the best thing to do is to uh, like what's driving. I put it this way. I get where you're coming from, but I think we have to love good more than we hate evil. Is almost the meta thing I'm challenging us here to do, and that's
Is there a
tough.
difference? That's what something
There
I
is.
struggle with because I always viewed those as exactly opposite sides of the same coin. Because I get accused sometimes, like, oh, you may be leaning a little too much into negativity. It's like I'm trying to use my voice to lift up good and then attack evil. And I'm like, I don't care which wherever I see it. If I see something that's awesome, I'm like, yeah, rock on, dude. That's great. If I see something that's horribly evil, I'm going to say so. Like I don't see a difference. So tell me where I'm wrong there. Like, because I've always viewed them as like literally equally. It's the same coin. It just depends on how you look at it.
So I mean, I think they go hand in hand, but I think it's kind of more of a, if we are trying to prioritize promoting what is good, if we're trying to prioritize like seeking the good, we're not going to let up on the evil. But what we will do is approach how we combat and call out that evil in a different way. I think there's some people who are like, I'm not saying this is you, but I think there's some people who are like, again, I think it goes back to the changing hearts and mind thing, and it's just like, for me, it's not enough. I think especially if you're an influencer, you're doing a podcast, like, it's if all you wanted to do was just say what is true, then, like, you could do that in 10 podcast episodes. You could basically just be like, "Here's the non-aggression principle. Here's why it's wrong to aggress. Here's how this applies to war. Here's how this applies to the economy. Here's how this," and just be like, "Okay, now I'm done. I've basically, explained everything in the world and why all these bad things are bad." Right? But part of loving the good more than hating the evil is kind of like, all right, now how do I, in the middle of this mess, try to like get people who are stuck in the evil and pull them into the good? And that means sometimes like this is again, I'm gonna keep preaching a little bit here. I hope I'm not preaching too much, but like, and again, like I'm saying this with all due respect and love for you, but like there's something here that reminds me a bit of like the way the Pharisees came after Jesus. Because they accused him of being soft on sin and soft on evil. But his whole thing was like, well, I'm going to meet people where they're at. I'm going to love them. I'm going to try to heal them. I'm going to try to like get them on the right path. And yeah, I'm concerned about their sin. I'm concerned about them not doing evil. But like, I don't want to kill them. I don't want to like, like I'm not satisfied with just saying you're evil and condemning you for all eternity. I want to rescue you. I want to bring you back. And you do that by doing what Jesus did, eating, like breaking bread with sinners, meeting people where they're at. And you don't have to compromise on what's true, but you can, I think we can be fully committed to not compromising on what is true while also breaking bread with people who are in the complete, who have completely had their morals and their intuitions and stuff twisted into the like a complete moral inversion. And we just need to kind of like, again, invoking Christian language here, be that salt and light, like to start challenging them. Like I think part of why like to zoom out here for a little bit, I think part of why the liberty movement has not been so successful is because we do send, and I'm guilty of this too. We can sometimes be too animated by just calling out what is evil. But like, who was the person who created like the biggest libertarian movement in our lifetime? It was Ron Paul. He's far from the biggest negative guy out there. I'm sure he would oppose things that needed opposed, but he also had this beautiful, message to bring people about the positive values of liberty and social cooperation and peace and limited government and all that. And it's just like I think that we're kind of missing that sometimes as advocates for these ideals. Is that um and I think you're someone that can really appreciate this because it's like the psychology of these people really needs to come into play. And I think too many libertarians are, call them on the spectrum or whatever, but they just think that you can go and like recite anatomy of the state to someone and they're going to become
Yeah.
a libertarian overnight. It's like, no, like it's, I mean, for some of us, maybe that happened. We had that like light bulb moment. Uh, but I think for most of us, like also, I think for me, I read Anatomy of the State and it was a light bulb moment. But I'd kind of like, I was ready to read that book. If you'd gone back in time, giving me that book 5 years earlier, wouldn't have resonated with me at all. So I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I don't want us to get soft on what is true, and I want us to call out the dogmas and the sort of like third rails that we have in our society. I want to attack those sacred cows, man. Right? I want to tear them down. But I just like I want to separate the sacred cows from the people who were caught up in the worship of the sacred cows. Not condone their evil, not condone their idolatry, but I just um, we gotta at some point. I think it's like we're too easily becoming useful idiots for the duopoly when we're just it's too easy to make enemies of people that we disagree with rather than trying to build bridges and relationships and trying to and listen, I'm not perfect at this. You could probably if I don't know if uh misogynist feminist is still in the chat, but like the other day I got into it with someone on her Twitter feed who just like was just imbibing such like normal boomer nonsense that I just kind of like lost my cool and started trolling him a bit. So I'm not perfect on this. I got to improve on this as well. It was easy to just call him out and just be like, like I was kind of like, you don't have any principles. You've betrayed Jesus. You don't follow Christ at all. You worship America. Like I'm just calling it out, and I'm basically kind of invoking that strategy that you said I should do in a way. And it didn't really do anything, right? And I kind of like as I was engaging with him, I kind of got less intense over time because I was almost like there's something gratifying about doing that in the moment, but I also feel like that's a trap for us, right? Because it's like do the counterfactual. Like, what if for every time we just attacked someone and demonized them and ostracized them, we tried the different approach? That's harder, but I
Hey,
think it's worth trying.
hey,
Maybe I'm hopelessly optimistic and naive, but I think it's worth trying.
no, no. By the way, Jacob, I believe in a lot of those same things too. Like, I'm not somebody who just goes out of the. I mean, I wouldn't have all these conversations online with people, particularly people I disagree with, if I wasn't concerned with, trying to meet people where they are and have good faith conversations. I feel this one is like I don't know. I don't know why I get so stuck into my car. Maybe because it's personal, because I got suckered by it, and I very easily could have died because of that choice, right?
Oh yeah,
That
no,
that
I
that
get it.
definitely, and so I see like a way that like I got suckered in. If I had the like, it's literally like a critical mass of people being like, "Yo, this is not cool. This is not an honorable profession." I might have thought differently about it. And so maybe not. Maybe there's a middle ground. Now, by the way, I've been refining this thought in real time. I think you probably seen me like the first time I even posted it on X. This is not like this is something I've really thought about deeply, but I think I'm onto at least a nugget which is like the culpability that most Americans have when they, because I see it's every time and it makes me cringe every time there's Veterans Day or Memorial Day or something. Thank you for your service comes up, and people fawning all over the troops and talking about them in a way in which they got like no agency whatsoever. Like this the language of like, Trump attacked that school and he sent them, or he, like, they're just like being moved around as if they're automatons without agency. And I just don't like that. I think that maybe there's a better way to talk about it. I'm still trying to search for it, but I feel like it's getting so emergent that we have to do something different. Did you get my point? Like, we're on the precipice of World War III, like literally, and this is not something that we have a whole bunch of runway to sort of talk about the same thing we were talking about on your show earlier tonight. Like, we're getting to the end here. Like, there's not a bunch of time, and I don't know what to do, but I feel like something needs to get done, because if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting. That's
Well,
my view.
I get that, and if but I still think it's a bit of a moot point because I just don't think there's enough of us to even like. I think that it won't be effective to just come out and demonize all of the. I think that will, like, I get the urgency, but I just feel like that's going to backfire. Like that's going to feed into
How
like
could it get worse?
I don't
Give me
know.
your
I could
worst
get.
case scenario, Jacob.
I don't know, man. It could always get worse. Israel's got nukes. I mean, they're not supposed to have nukes. It
No, but I just
officially
mean, like,
doesn't have nukes, but they have
you saying
nukes.
your opinion online. Like, how is that going to make things any worse in the grand scheme of things? It's like it's just getting so much worse day over day, and nobody. I don't know if you know this, Steve. This is another reason I was thinking about different strategies, that the peaceful strategies. I don't know if you notice, it's a felony to sort of encourage anybody in the military to consider otherwise, to not obey, to not comply. Like, that's literally 10 years in prison for anybody who utters those mouth noises. Like, there's not
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of things
even
we can do.
I know it's tough. It's even tough for people in the military to be like there's legal provisions to be a conscientious objector in the military, but they're the guidelines are written in such stupid ways that it's just like, well, you can protest on moral grounds, but not on philosophical ground. And of course, you and me would be like, what do you mean moral but not philosophical? That's
It's a
that's
contradiction in
literally
terms.
stupid. You can't, what's a moral conclusion that's not informed by some kind of implicit or explicit philosophy? I mean, it's just nonsense. But
I don't know if you saw this,
um
but there's some Twitter account that their entire purpose is to inform military people of their rights, right? With respect to that type of thing. And Twitter banned their account for illegal activities.
listen, I think there's also like maybe there's a little bit of ships crossing here. I think you start by trying to reach people. I think you evaluate it case by case. I think that, like, I'm thinking primarily of like an 18-year-old kid who just got through basic training and is now getting shipped off to God knows where, right? Like, and I'm just like, I don't know. Hard for me to feel like this kid is fully committed and knows better right now. Someone who's like serving their like 10th tour or something like enthusiastically, and you've tried to talk to them. I'm not saying there's not a point where you don't like uh draw a line in the sand and be like, you're committed to evil and now you're my enemy, right? But I think it's kind of a public perception thing more than like there's a case by case thing, there's a public perception thing. I think that someone in the comments said that like changing hearts and minds isn't going to be something we can do fast enough, and we need a cultural, we need a revolution, hopefully not a violent one. But I'm just like, but if it's not a violent one, then what is the revolution other than changing hearts and minds? Like, I just don't, not to be disrespectful to the audience, right? But I don't know what it looks like other than, unless you're saying it's going to be a political revolution through voting, and then Brent and I will both laugh at you. But, but it's like I think it's the only thing we got is changing hearts and minds. That's literally it. I think that is our only viable long-term weapon. And can we do it fast enough? Probably not. Unfortunately, probably a lot of people are going to die, and we're going to continue to sit here and warn about the consequences of this and not be listened to, and things are going to get worse before they get better. But in the meantime, like, the important thing is that everyone that's in this space gets more people listening to us and seeing that we keep getting this right. And that's going to snowball effect over time, not just in this generation, but over generations, right? Like Murray Rothbard was just like what, like a few people in his living room, right? Like I mean, and look at what he spurned, right? You know, look, or what he yeah, the way he planted and grew, right? You know, who knows what you or I are doing, what Dave's done, what you know, people like Malice have done, right? You know, and uh the, these are going to have repercussions for generations that are kind of impossible to really fully know. We already actually know that the millennial and younger generations are far more anti-war than the previous ones, and to some extent, like, and this might actually be a point to slightly your favor. I have to think about it, but like recruitment into the military, as far as I've seen, is at kind of an all-time low. I think they're actually really desperate to find people. So, now I still think there's kind of like a large subset of those people that are very young and very naive, but there are all I think this is also part of our, like, you know, the solution is also, like, getting into, you know, college campuses, high schools if you can, although that's a little bit more tricky. You know, trying to influence the younger generation to get our ideas in front of them at younger ages to kind of counteract that kind of grooming process that happens. But I do get what you're coming from. Like, you know, is there ever a point where there's a line? Like, and listen, like, yeah, there kind of is, you know, but I do think that I tend to err on the side of trying to resist doing that first and making that closer to a last resort. Um, you know, because again, I don't think it's gonna. Uh, uh, I don't think I'm a doomer though. Like, I don't know if you disagree with me. I think things are gonna get worse before they get better. I don't see any way around that. Um, that's just human nature. That's kind of the way things are stacked right now. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't say that with any kind of like, you know, I got 5 kids, man. I'm not sitting here like, you know, thrilled to be saying I think things are going to get worse before they get better. Um, but every one of us has a different. I'll stop ranting on this. Every one of us has a different sphere of influence too, right? Like, I'm within the Christian church. You know, you probably can guess how many families in my church and in my audience have kids and family in the military, right? Now, I don't hold any punches, man. I have an episode entitled "Why America is the Bad Guy." Right? And it's like I am very willing to die on hills and to challenge people's assumptions and to try to, like, you know, shake them out of their, yeah, into their doctrination to the American religion. I think that's important. Um, but we gotta show them that, like, we're the good guys, I guess, and not. I think there's something where we as libertarians sometimes we too easily, even though, like, it's bullshit, man. Like, yes, we don't actually. We should probably talk about this because this is where I think we also disagreed online. Because I have often said to dispel this thing where it's like you libertarians just hate America, right? You're just anti-American. And I don't like uh, sort of feeding into that trope. I try to come at it, including on this subject of the military, and telling people, listen, like, I'm not anti America, like the people or the culture or even like some of our traditions. I think some of our traditions are at least like comparatively good. There's like, well, these were good stepping stones, so to speak, and I can appreciate them. Um, so, like, I'm not anti-America, I'm anti our government. I'm anti, you know, the evil things that the American government does. And I really think that distinction is important because otherwise it's too easy for the duopoly, especially for the right, to just completely hand wave us away as just being like, well, like, you know, this is what they try to do. Like, well, we're just a bunch of lefties who hate America. That's literally all they have right now as an argument. It's not a very good one, but it can still be convincing if we kind of make it easy for them to make that argument. And that's why I'm very insistent about that kind of line about I don't hate America. I just kind of make it simple, say I love America and I hate the government. I do get your point that, like, when I say I love America, there's some caveats to that. It does mean something different than what the average person means when they say it.
Yeah, and that's fair. And by the way, thank you for providing this nuance and insight. You give me a lot to chew on. I don't think I've arrived yet. I think there's still a nugget that I'm sort of chewing through. There just feels to me that there's some moral culpability that the whole country has with respect to not only the military but also the government, like you called out. There's problems on both sides. It's like everyone talks about the government like it's in a vacuum. It's like, well, the people pick these people, like let's be honest here. Like it's not like they just elected
But
themselves. Yes,
yeah,
I
but
know,
it's
I know the whole system, the two-party. I know all the things, Jacob, but I'm still believing that, like, look, you can't just hold the government accountable as if they're like some autonomous thing that just happens. People contribute to this whole thing, just like with the military too. And that's another thing that I struggle with is people look at the military like they're not part of the government. Like they're the most important part of the government. They're the teeth. They're the mercenaries that will do the bidding of the people in DC. And like try to treat them like they're not the government is foolish, I think. And to sort of believe like we got no culpability in any of this mess that we created, like I don't think that's wise either.
no, I agree. I think we have some culpability in that. Um, but these things are more gray than black and white, I think, right? Like and at the end of the day, I just think I'm going to put way more culpability on the people in charge than on the people who are maybe being like useful idiots. I think it's a lot more. Put it this way, that saying like never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like I don't use that for the government. I kind of have the opposite rule for the government. But for the people, so I guess it's one of the things that's kind of like you're right. The government's not like it's not it's kind of just a euphemism, right? It's just a pretense. It's just people.
It's just people. This is the
But
government is
where
just
do
a
we?
construct.
But like, where do we draw the line and the different lines of government and the different levels of culpability within that? It's not all they're not all equally culpable, right? I think you would agree
For
with that.
sure.
And
For
and
sure.
so, there's different levels of intensity and then also like this gets into like a lot of weeds we probably don't have time for tonight, but like moral responsibility and culpability are complicated things even just in matters of law, let alone just even ethics broadly speaking. Cause like there just think about even murder, right? Like there's manslaughter and then there's willful premeditated murder. And like a soldier killing an innocent person, where does that fall on that? I think that's actually really a little bit hard to say. Like, well, is it premeditated? Well, in a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. It's not accidental, but it's also not like they set out to do it. But all and so like it just there's I think there are so many troubling, interesting, but in a troubling way, moral questions and psychological considerations that come into play when it comes into the military. Um, I don't see that same thing at play with politicians, though. So I guess that's why I'm kind of like, okay, people in the
Pretty black and white
military,
with those guys.
yeah, with the military, it's like, okay, probably the higher you get. Again, I was like, someone who's like a first year recruit, I'm gonna have a lot more, you know, nuance to give them than someone who's like, on their like eighth tour and it's just like, literally like, oh, I love shooting, Muslims or something. Listen, there's people in the IDF who are absolutely monsters when it comes to dealing with the Palestinians. So like, I get that. There's definitely people in the military who are not honorable on, from any country, whether it's Israel or America. Uh, and so I think you are right. But I think what would be helpful is that instead of painting with a broad brush, I think we should try to be specific when that happens, right? Like find the examples of the people who have actually done the most atrocious crimes with the least amount of um, well, they didn't know what they were doing kind of like circumstances, and like they actually can be proven to like have knowingly killed innocent people, and just like
How do you wait?
hold
Wait.
those
Let me
examples
ask
to
real quick. Let
people.
me ask. Well, how do you define innocent people? That's talk about gray areas.
Yeah, well, that's
Because
I mean, I guess it would just
I
depend
got
on
I
the
got in trouble
conflict.
for I got in trouble for saying this, but I said a couple of times like look, Iran was just sitting there minding their own business. Like Honestly, they're sitting there. They weren't attacking people. It wasn't this 47 years of straight war. Like up until the United States attacked them, they were just sitting there not attacking anybody else. And people went over there and they started attacking this sovereign country. They halfway around the world start blowing them to bits. And I said, if there's any justice in the world, the Iranians would forcibly, respond to that attack and repel the invaders. And I got a whole lot of hate about that. And I'm looking at this going like, if you're in the military, are you an innocent person? Because you're just sitting there at your post, and all of a sudden a bomb comes in your front door. Like you were aggressed upon. To be honest, right? Like you were attacked. You have the right to defend yourself, don't you?
So I think these ethical questions get complicated when we scale up to groups and we again add in all of this like layers of a doctor. Like we're not talking about like uh I don't know, like guns for hire who are literally like I don't know, like rivaling gangs or mercenary groups. Like
What's the
it's
difference? At the
well
end of the day, what's the difference?
there's not a difference in one sense, but there's a difference in another, which is that with the mafia, everyone just knows it's the mafia, right? But with the government, everyone doesn't think it's the mafia, or at least they're conditioned and indoctrinated to not think
Hmm.
it's the mafia, right? So we understand that as anarchists. But like there's just so many people who just don't understand that distinction. And so it's
That's
like
what I'm trying
what's
to shake
innocent.
loose. I guess that's it, Jacob. That's what I'm trying to shake loose. And I mentioned earlier the verbiage people use, like this sort of these abstract concepts, like they were sent over there, and they like the actual actions that people are committing, people don't even think about them. They just think like, well, the United States military, as if it's this one thing, took some action. And I think this is where you're going to run into issues with trying to identify individual situations, is because it is so uh, communal. It's this group. It's like you know, good guys, and then you have these bad guys over in this other country, and they have this scuffle, and they bombed each other both directions, and then like there's never any detail that comes out of that, unless it's like when you bomb the school, or some really egregious thing. But for example, here's a good example: the oil refinery that blew up. Guess what? It's misting oil into the air in Tehran, making it impossible to breathe, and harming everybody, including all the civilians. There was somebody that did that. We're never going to know that person's name ever, right? Like it just sort of goes into the board. It just comes into United States military did X, right? Like that's how it's reported. And so how do you get down to the granular level of calling out the person who did that? We never even know who it was.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is why journalism internationally is so important to try to like, get more transparency on a lot of these things and find the individuals who are doing it. I think that insofar as we do have instances where we know things have happened, we got to call attention to that to call for more transparency. But like, at some point, I guess it's kind of like a funnel thing, right? And like when you're going to go and talk about these conflicts, you want to keep it as simple as you can because people are going to barely pay attention. And if you make it way too complicated for them, they're not going to pay attention at all. And so, like, colloquially, the Iranian, the Iranian Israel thing's super complicated, to be honest. But, like, let's say it was like, uh, America invading Afghanistan, or sorry, invading Iraq, right? Like that one, I think is almost ambiguous. Like there's no ambiguity there anymore.
Nope.
The American soldier is in a sort of like national stage sense the aggressor, and the Afghani soldier is the defender, right? And we would say the Afghani soldier is
Iraqi.
innocent, and the Iraqi, sorry, yeah, Iraqi soldier is innocent and just defending themselves, right? At least in the context of that situation. Um, but I mean, not every position in the military is equally like in a combat role, but like remember the people in the American army were lied to and told that there were weapons of mass destruction there and that they were posing a threat and that they were involved in 9/11. So that's like, this gets into like when you have a murder case right? Or a case where like someone's been killed, and then it's like you get into the different types of murder. And it's like, well, was it willful murder, premeditated, or was it manslaughter? Was it accidental manslaughter? Well, so again, all of this stuff gets actually really complicated because then we're not just talking about a one-off instance. We're talking about like on a scale with all sorts of competing, because it's not even, as you know, it's not just America versus Iraq or Iran versus Israel. There are all sorts of state and non-state powers and competing interests within all these entities that are all, influencing the actions and the outcomes of all this. So it gets really complicated, and I think that excuse me, I'm losing my voice now. I think that we like I get what you're saying. We want to push people towards the sort of clarity of like the distinction between the state and the mob is one of convenience and not a fact. Um, but I don't know, we gotta use breadcrumbs to get them there most of the time. And that means sometimes like we do have to kind of evaluate things in a statist sort of convention that's like it sort of like think of it this way. It's kind of like using Newtonian physics, right? When you're teaching a kid, you don't start by teaching them quantum physics. You don't even start with like Einstein level physics, right? You start with the really simple Newtonian one that's kind of accurate, but then it's like once you've learned enough science and physics, you realize like, oh no, this shit's way more complicated. But this is like the building blocks we need to kind of get people on the road to like just being able to have a working theory of how the world works that like works well enough to get them like to the point where we can now have the conversations about relativity and have the conversations about quantum physics, ethics, and especially when we're talking about applying libertarian ethics to international conflicts spanning back decades. Yeah, we definitely have to like give people bread before they have milk, or I mean, milk before bread, and bread before they have meat, so to speak. Um, which I think can be frustrating for us sometimes because it's like, you know, I'm not, again, this is one of those things I'm not saying I'm perfect at. There's some days where I'm really patient with people, and there's some days where I want to grab people and shake them violently, like just wake the hell up. But it's the battle we got to fight. Unfortunately, is to try to meet people where they're at. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm fading a little bit, but hopefully that made a
No,
little
no,
bit of
no.
sense.
We need to wrap it anyway. So, thank you for those inputs. I agree broadly with what you're saying. I just there's something in me that feels like there's still a nugget I'm chewing on here, and it feels like the moment is really big this time, and slow walking it might not get us there. So anyway, I don't. I remain unconvinced either way. I'm not falling down one side or another too
No,
hard right now.
I think this was
I'm
good.
still
It was like
trying to
like
talk it out.
yeah, no, I think this is good. I think that like what you're saying has merit too. Like, and I think these are kind of like tensions that we have to wrestle with, and we're all gonna tackle them in our different ways a little bit, and hopefully that rounds out in the long run. Also, someone in the comments just mentioned, which is totally true, and we should end on this, which is that we're fighting psychological warfare from the government right now because they stole an hour of our life away last night. So
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just like, man, I shouldn't be this tired at 10:30. Oh, that's right, it's actually 11:30. Screw you, Washington D.C.
Yeah, here, here. That's a great place to end it. Anyway, why don't you go ahead and plug your stuff? Tell people where to find you, man.
Yeah, of course. Biblicalanarchypodcast.com. That's the most direct way to find me. If you look up my name, Jacob Winograd, or Biblical Anarchy anywhere, you'll be sure to find me. Libertarianchristians.com. I'm not like Brett here. I'm not solo. I'm part of a giant uh not giant. I'm part of a small but somewhat sizable crew of fellow Christian libertarians trying to make the case for a free society from the Christian worldview. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, Brent. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, dude. Everybody go follow Jacob if you're not. He's one of the best in our space, man. I really appreciated the chat. Thank you for letting me refine my ideas, and we'll chat in the future about it, I'm sure.
Yep, sounds good, man.
Yep. Chat later.